This episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast is brought to you by Audible. For a free 30-day trial and one free audiobook of your choice, head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/audible. You're listening to the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast, the weekly show sharing proven methods and systems in marketing, equipment, and customer service, educational and motivational, to help make your lawn care business an overwhelming success. Now here's your host, Julio Tomei. Welcome, Lawn Care Nation, to another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I'm your host, Julio Tomei, and this is episode number 121, entitled Crazy Events That Have Happened to Me in Lawn Care. Well, hello, everybody, and thanks again for joining me this week on another episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. I really appreciate you guys tuning in each and every week and downloading those episodes. As well, I also appreciate, of course, those who have sent me questions, comments, and feedback on the show, as well as show suggestions. Like I say, I really do appreciate that interaction and that feedback. If you haven't already left a review, you can head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/reviews. There you'll find all of the worldwide aggregated reviews that you can read through, and also a link to where you can go and leave your own review. I'd also like to remind you guys about that opportunity to be the show opener for the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. So what I'm looking for here is similar to what I've used in the past, and those who have done similar in the past, is basically to just introduce yourself and say you're listening to the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. So if you'd like to, open a episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast, maybe promote your YouTube channel or your Instagram account. Like I said, just a brief description of who you are, what you're trying to promote, and that you're listening to the episode of the Lawn Care Business Success Podcast. So if you'd like to do that, you can head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com, and on the right-hand side, you'll see a little gray leave voicemail tab, and you can click on that and record your audio message. Also, if you have a question that you want answered on an episode of the podcast, maybe a business related question, something you've been thinking about, something that maybe I haven't answered in a previous episode, you can also do that, leaving a voicemail message as well, and I may use that in a episode. So for this week, I wanted to talk about some of the crazy events that have happened to me in lawn care. Now, if you listen to last week's episode, I talked about that client that I had where I went and I mowed their lawn. And before I did for that week, I had actually knocked on the door and talked to them on their front steps for a good 10 to 15 minutes about all sorts of things related to, how things were going in their life, as long as the condition of the lawn, and things like that. And, then I proceeded to mow the lawn. I bagged all the grass clippings, put it on their curb. And then a few weeks later, when I left the bill at the front door for that previous month's worth of work, which included that particular day, they questioned whether I was there or not that day. And, were trying to tell me that I overcharged them because I didn't mow the lawn that day. And I tried to, refresh their memory by telling them that, yes, I was, that was the day that we talked for 10 or 15 minutes on your front step before I mowed the lawn. And they had absolutely no recollection of that conversation. And, this was at this point only about 2 weeks prior. And then the fact that I had bagged the grass and had to put it on their front curb for it to be picked up by the city, this it just made no sense that they couldn't remember it, and they were telling their daughter that I had overcharged them, and their daughter was adamant that I wasn't there because her mother was saying I wasn't there, and I was just completely dumbfounded at that situation. So this had me thinking after I recorded last week's episode about some of the other so-called or kind of crazy things that have happened to me over the past 12 years during lawn care. So I thought, wouldn't it be fun to kind of do a little bit of a different episode and just kind of talk about those stories of some of those things that I remember that have, I've gone through during my lawn care career. So a couple of these stories I'm sure you guys have heard of because I've touched on individual stories in previous episodes, just like last week's episode included that story about the lady not remembering that I was mowing her lawn. But we'll start with a story some of you guys may have heard of before, and that is me driving through a fence. So this happened when I first bought my Walker mower in 2007. So I bought a 42-inch MT 23 GHS mower, and I picked it up from the dealer, and I brought it home first, and tried to learn the controls on my own on my front yard by doing a quick mowing. But this was I think it was on a Friday. So I picked it up first thing in the morning, and I had a job to do that day, and it was a new client. And they, this was the first day I was going to mow their lawn, and it was quite overgrown for this first cut. They had just purchased the property and moved in, and the grass was like a foot tall in some areas. So, I figured what a perfect day to go use this brand new Walker mower with its GHS system that I could go and start utilizing my investment. So anyways, I was at my own house. I was mowing my front lawn, quite slowly, trying to figure out the controls. I, at the time, was living in a cul-de-sac. So then, I took it on the road after I finished my mowing. I took it in the cul-de-sac and was just driving it around, learning the turning and the controls and the sensitivity of it. And thought, it was, I had it down pretty good. It wasn't too bad. It's still a little bit jerky in some areas and stuff, but not too bad. So I loaded it up, took it to this client's house, and proceeded to start to mow the lawn. And it was doing fantastically, even with that really tall grass. I obviously raised the deck up and was trudging along at a fairly slow pace because the grass was so tall. But needless to say, it was doing fantastic. As long as I was, creeping along, I didn't have to, trim it all down with a trimmer first or anything like that. The mower was cutting it and bagging it in the back with no issues. So I get to an area of the lawn where I'm going along the back side of the fence, and this fence, is obviously separating this house from the neighboring house. The only difference is that this house was higher than the neighboring house. So the neighbor's backyard was a bit of a drop off, and there was like a big retaining wall, I guess, and then this fence on top. So here I am mowing, and all of a sudden, the mower drops down sideways, and it gets wedged against this fence. And it got wedged basically by where my shoulder area was. So it was there was a fence post at that spot, and then the cedar, like 8-foot fence panels, and the mower had like fallen sideways slightly, and then got wedged up against the single fence post that was there. So, upon my, after kind of the shock of it all, I discovered that because the lawn was so tall, I couldn't see that the section of lawn that I was mowing had been completely leveled in the past, but the lawn that I was continuing, for some reason, they stopped at that point, and the lawn then sloped down towards this fence. And I couldn't tell because the grass was just so tall. From, a distance, when you're approaching it, it just all looks the same. You can't see that the ground had sloped down towards the fence. So, I got myself in a predicament here, and I'm trying to figure out, and, with the walker, it has sort of those, the zero turn type controls, and you've got this big, huge rear end on you, this big GHS box. So I was like, well, trying to figure out, like, how am I going to get unstuck here? And, being a novice at the machine, I was playing with the controls, and the next thing you know, I'm turning on a dime, and the whole GHS box just takes out the fence the fence panel. Now, this is one of those cedar fences where it's like, 8 feet long, but then it has like the lattice top. There's like a 2x4 with like a 1-foot section of lattice on top. And the GHS box fit just perfectly under that 2x4. So it basically took out all of the boards underneath, but left the 2x4 with the lattice on top, and was, kind of wedged even more now, because now it was like half sticking out past into the neighbor's yard. There was this big gaping hole. And of course, just to make it even all the more exciting, there was a pretty ticked off dog in the neighbor's yard that wasn't too happy that I just took out the fence panel and knocked all this wood and debris into its yard. So he was almost practically foaming at the mouth, ticked off at me, and the only sort of saving grace there was that it was a pretty steep slope on the other side of this fence, and the dog didn't look like it was prepared to try to come up the slope at me. So it stayed down on the ground level there, barking at me. So I had to sort of scramble and figure, okay, now, what am I going to do? So I remember that only a few hours earlier when I picked up the machine, the dealer said to me, or the particular, commercial sales guy said to me, if you need anything, or if you run into troubles with it, just give me a call and I'll come out to meet you and, help you figure it out. So I was like, okay, well, I didn't think I was going to use that get out of jail card so quickly. So I called the dealer, and he started joking on the phone going, well, that didn't take you very long. So he came out and met me at the same time. I called my brother-in-law, who is also in lawn care, and told him what happened, and got him to get the fence supplies I needed, because I was looking at the fence going, okay, well, the top is fine, the sides are fine. It's just the boards that were in the middle that were knocked out and broken. So he went and picked up a bunch of fence supplies and stuff, the boards and the galvanized nails and all that stuff we needed to get the fence back and repaired, because obviously on a Friday and stuff with this dog in the other yard, I wasn't going to leave the fence open. I knew that my client would want their kids to be able to be playing in the backyard and stuff. So, the dealer showed up, and he came, and then my brother-in-law showed up, and we're all looking at it going, how are we going to get this out? And, my dealer, to his credit, actually climbed onto the other side of the yard, into the neighbor's yard with this vicious dog. And luckily, like I said, there was a slope. So he was standing on the slope. But and he was pushing the walker from behind, as me and my brother-in-law were pulling on the walker, trying to free it, and I think eventually one of us had to get on it and use the controls and stuff to try to help push the thing, because we couldn't even open the on the walker. If you want to release the transmissions, you got to lift that hopper box up to hit some switches or levers on the actual hydraulic motors, and that releases them so that you can push it. Well, we couldn't even do that because the GHS box was wedged under that 2x4. So we couldn't even open it to release those transmissions. So, he was pushing on it, and we had, the other guy pulling on it. I think we might have used the strap or something as well. And he was pulling while, I may have been, I can't remember exactly who was on the machine, pushing it forward or using the levers to go forward, but we managed to free it, and were able to get it safely out of the way with nobody getting hurt. So that was one of the craziest sort of events, something that has stuck in my mind. And I always laugh when I hear or see, on Instagram, things like that, guys posting pictures of crazy things that they've, predicaments that they've gotten into with their mowers. That certainly refreshes my memory on that. Another sort of crazy event, and not too crazy, but something that sort of stands out to me as well, is again with that walker. And that's something that happened, unfortunately, more than once for me with that machine, and that was it getting stuck. So, with a lot of the lawns here, I know I've talked about it being always rainy here. There's a lot of clay in the soil. The water doesn't drain, and it can stay soggy and wet for days and days and days. And, there was a couple times, but this one time in particular where I was going along and mowing this lawn with a backyard, and all of a sudden, the walker started to feel like it was losing traction, and lo and behold, it was starting to sink in this lawn. And again, I was going along a fence. The more I tried to free it up, it was really no use. The machine was starting to sink more and more. And I think with a walker, for me, what I found was because of that fantastic GHS system, the blower hangs down there, underneath the mower. So you have very little ground clearance, and it's all fine with a regular lawn that can support the weight. But as soon as those wheels or tires start to sink in a lawn, then that GHS system gets caught up and sort of makes things worse, because it makes it almost impossible to get that machine out going forward, and you almost have to go backwards. But if it's muddy and wet and clay, there's just not enough traction. The tread on the tires just fills up with mud, and it's basically like you've got drag racing slicks on the mower. So in this particular case, I'm there to mow a lawn that didn't look half bad, except it was, needing a cut when I got there. And the next thing you know, I've got this mower buried in the lawn, and it's starting to look like a big mud pit. Luckily, in this case, the customer had a whole bunch of scrap wood, things like 2x6s and other remnants and cut pieces of wood. So I was able to take some of the wood from their shed, and luckily as well, the customer was very apologetic about the condition of their lawn, that they didn't have proper drainage and that sort of stuff. And they made me basically feel, or tried to make me feel like it wasn't my fault. But I was like, obviously it's my fault. Your lawn will look worse now when I left than what it did if I hadn't touched it. But these things happen. And in this case, I was trying to free it up, and this customer is like 80 something years old. So they're not able to come out and help me, obviously. And I didn't obviously ask, but, I had to figure this out on my own. It was in the backyard. I'm no access to my truck, even to be able to, get a rope or something tied to the machine. It was just like, there's nothing. I either need just people to help, or I'm going to have to figure this out on my own. So what I ended up doing in this particular case, was I took, that wood, the 2x6s, and I basically wedged it as much as I could, under the tires, and they were sort of sticking up on an angle, and I took another big chunk of wood because it's all I had available to me, another section of 2x6, and I held it sideways and basically used it as a hammer on the back of the long 2x6s to try to, hammer them deeper under the tires as much as I could. And it was still up on an angle. So then, there was no way with the amount of weight and the thing, in this particular case, I could open the hopper and release the transmissions, but it wasn't going to do anything for me because it was so buried in there. There was no way I could pull it out myself. So my only hope was to actually use the machine's power to pull itself out. But again, difficult because the wheels were all muddy and everything. So what I did was I sat on the chair trying to figure it out, trying to, reverse the machine, hoping that it would grip. And luckily where it got stuck, there was just enough room for me while seated on the chair of the walker. There was, again, like I said, I was right up against the fence doing the sort of perimeter cut, and there was a fence post that was concreted into the ground. And there was just enough room, like I say, for me while seated on the walker to bend my leg and put my foot up against that. If you're looking at a 4x4 post going into the ground, then you have your fence panel nailed to it. The actual fence boards are only half an inch thick or so. So you have an inch and a half or so of space there on the side of that fence post that you can put your foot on. So I had my foot up against that, and, with one leg, and all my might, while at the same time hitting the reverse levers, I was basically pushing myself against the back of my seat, trying to push the walker backwards, while also reversing. And I could feel it going. It would go up a little bit and slide back down. It would go up a little bit. And just through sheer determination and adrenaline, using just one leg, I was able to push that machine while reversing far enough for it to grip enough of the boards that the boards then, the machine reversed back far enough and the boards kind of leveled out onto the rest of the ground. And, I was able to then reverse the rest of the way on the boards and get out of the situation onto more solid ground. So that was another crazy sort of event. And like I say, unfortunately with that one, it happened a few more times with me with that machine, and is ultimately one of the reasons that I decided to sell the walker, was that because of the amount of rain here, that it was happening more and more often, and the machine was just too heavy for the lawns that I was servicing. So that's another kind of crazy event. So I'm just going to pause for the podcast announcements, and then we'll get into a couple more stories right after this. So stay tuned. Hey guys, if you have any questions or comments about the show, I'd love to hear from you. You can head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/contact. And while you're there, why not join my mailing list and get access to a free PDF document of a landscape maintenance contract you can feel free to copy and use in your own business. For you Instagram users out there, be sure to follow me at Lawn Care Business Success. And if you haven't checked out my videos yet, well, what are you waiting for? Be sure to subscribe to the Lawn Care Business Success YouTube channel. Now, I know you guys love listening to audio while you work as much as I do, so I've partnered up with Audible to offer you guys a free 30-day trial and one free audiobook of your choice. There's no long-term commitments, and you can cancel anytime. And get this, even if you cancel during the trial period, you get to keep your free audiobook. It's a great way to try the service and see if Audible is right for you. So why not give it a try? Head on over to lawncarebusinesssuccess.com/audible. Now back to the show. Okay, so before the break there, I was talking about some of the crazy things that have happened to me while mowing. So I'm just going to continue with a couple of more of those types of events. So this other event, again, has happened more than once. And it wasn't so much of a crazy event, but just an unfortunate event. And this is my truck, my mowing rig, truck, and trailer being hit while parked at a customer's property mowing a lawn. And in both cases, being a hit and run, where the truck has been hit and, I discover after I'm done the job and come around and see, the truck is, been damaged and nobody has taken responsibility for it. So the first one happened at a customer property, and, I was mowing the back lawn. I finished the job, get the whole thing done, trimming, blowing, all that stuff. I come around, I load my equipment, I walk around the driver's side, and when I get to the truck, my jaw just drops, and the whole bed of the truck bed is completely caved in. And I was like, what the heck happened? And this is on a quiet little street, with no center line or anything like that, just a residential street. There's like absolutely no traffic. And I'm just like, what the heck? Like, how is this even possible? And I'm looking directly across from where the truck is parked, and there's a driveway. But there's no cars in the driveway. There's no nothing. And I'm thinking like that's the only way that this truck could be hit, was if somebody was backing out of that driveway straight back into the truck. Because driving sideways, there's no damage to the trailer. For a car coming along the road in either direction, there's no damage to the trailer. There's no damage to the front of the truck. It's just this, the bed of the truck that has been completely caved in. So I decided to, I was like, what am I going to do? And the customer was actually home and came out and was like, well, what's the matter? And I said, look, my truck's been smashed while I was here mowing your lawn. So they suggested that I phone the police and that I don't move the truck, just leave it where it was. So that there'd be, the police could have a look at it. So, lo and behold, the, police I had to wait quite a while for them to come, because obviously this is pretty low priority. I think I waited actually a couple hours for a police officer to show up, but I was like adamant about staying there and making sure that I had a police officer see what had happened. So they looked at it and they kind of agreed that it kind of looked like somebody might have backed into it, and that that driveway there would be sort of the reasonable conclusion. So anyways, they said, I was free to go. They looked at it. They took some pictures. They also took some measurements of where the height of the damage and all that sort of stuff. And there was some, a bit of red paint and stuff as well that was left on the truck, some reddish scrapes. So, they took that as evidence, and they let me go. A week or so later, I got a call from a police officer saying that, they were investigating it and investigating the vehicles that were from that house, and they saw that there was a red vehicle that normally lives there. And they went to check it out and saw that there was, scrapes and stuff that were consistent at the same height on the back bumper of the vehicle. And they questioned the owner, and the owner admitted that, yes, they did hit the truck, and just panicked, I guess, and took off. So luckily, I didn't have to pay insurance deductibles and things like that to have it repaired. The insurance company took it all. Took care of it because they obviously knew who had done it, and I guess went after that person's insurance policy to pay for the damages. The second time that my truck was hit was at a fertilizer place, an organic fertilizer supplier. I pulled into this small parking lot. There was a couple of other little businesses that sort of shared this little strip mall, very tiny parking lot. Nowhere for me to really park except against this one building, against their wall, with a bunch of other vehicles parked in parking spots, sort of facing my truck, but still plenty of room for somebody to back out of their parking stall and go. I was literally in this store for 5 minutes, picking up a bag of fertilizer. I walked in, grabbed the bag I needed, went to the till, paid for it, came out, and my truck was hit. And, I went to load the fertilizer in the back and noticed right by the back tail light on the passenger side that there was this big basketball-sized indentation where it says like the 4x4 sticker, and the sticker was kind of scraped off and stuff. So I was like, man. Luckily, there was no real paint damage. It was just the decal that was kind of scraped, and the dents looked like I could probably pull them out. But again, nobody around. I went back to talk to the owner of the building there. They didn't have any security cameras or anything, so I couldn't really tell. There was no witnesses. Nobody saw anything. So I was kind of stuck with that one. And I didn't want to pay the $300 deductible for that. So I figured, I was like, you know what? I'm going to go and see if I can pull these dents out. Especially being the back of a truck bed. If you lie on the ground looking up, you can actually see, those certain areas there, and have access to them. So I went and bought some, I went to the automotive parts store. I bought one of those like suction cup dent pullers. So I thought, I'll try that. This is only like $14. So I went and put that, and lo and behold, the basketball size one just popped right out. As soon as I stuck that suction cup on it and tightened it, I gave it a good yank, and it just completely popped out. And then there was some other smaller dents underneath the lower half, but like I say, because there was access from the back side of it, just above the tailpipe, I was able to use a hammer on the back side of that to sort of bang those out. It wasn't perfect, but because there's no paint damage and stuff, I was able to get it fairly good. I had one of those hammer and dollies used in body work and stuff, so I was able to sort of finagle it and get it good enough that I wouldn't have to pay the $300 deductible, and learned my lesson not to park in that parking lot. And ever since, anytime I need fertilizer from that particular place, I actually park on the other side of the buildings on a street, a residential street, and I walk in, and they give me their dolly to load up fertilizer in, and I actually walk it to the other street to load up, just so that that doesn't happen again. So one of the other crazy stories involving my truck while working was this one time where My brother-in-law actually was going away on vacation, and he was servicing some customers' lawns in an adjacent city, and he asked me to take care of this one particular lawn. And for me, it was more of a pain because it was so far away, but he really needed the lawn to be serviced because it was just growing so much from the work that he had been doing to the lawn. So I agreed and, figured I'll do him a favor and go out and do it. But it was, like I say, really a bit of a pain because it was just so far to drive out there to do this one. So anyways, I, on this particular day, make the long trek out there. And when I got there, there was another gardening company there on the premises already. And there was a whole bunch of, I could see from far away, a whole bunch of tools and stuff laid out on the lawn, and, some other things all, sort of close to the road. So I pulled up and I rolled down the window and I asked them what they were doing, and they were just doing a whole bunch of garden installations and stuff. For this particular customer. So I thought, well, that's kind of weird. I thought my brother-in-law did all that stuff for this customer, but apparently I found out after that he didn't, that he only took care of the lawn for this particular customer, and that, they had already had a gardener that they had been using for years, this other company. So I, went and talked to them. And I had pulled over, and this is one of those streets where it's kind of a rural street. There's gravel on the sides of the road, and then the lawn starts. There's no curbs or anything like that. And like I said, they had a bunch of tools laid out and stuff. So, after the 1 or 2 minute quick conversation, I pulled away and started driving down the road. And then I started to hear like a thumping sound, and I pulled over and quickly found that my rear tire on the truck was completely flat. So I was like, what the heck did I just, go over that would make the tire completely flat? And so I'm trying to inspect the tire. There's no visible signs of any screws or anything. But I could hear the air still coming out. And there was 2 large holes on the tire. And I was like, what the heck would have pierced the tire? So, here I'm on the side of the road, this rural road. And, the tires were fairly new. And I had them changed, I think, the summer previous. And of course, the guys doing it used a impact wrench to put the wheels on, because, on the side of the road here with just the wrench and things that I had with me on the truck, I could not get the bolts loose for taking the tire off. So I was like, what the heck am I going to do here? I'm far from home, trying to service this one customer for my brother-in-law. The tire is losing air rapidly. It's almost completely flat at the moment, and I can't get the tire off. Luckily, I remembered that I had the tire repair plugs with me. So I decided, well, let me try and fix the tire while it's on the truck, because I had the tire repair plugs, and I also had one of those small 12-volt air compressors that you plug into your cigarette lighter and fill tires. So after, a lot of work trying to get these tire plugs in, I discovered there was 2 holes. I was able to plug them with the plug kit, but it was a lot of work trying to do it while lying on the ground, and face thing. Luckily, this was on the passenger side, so I wasn't in traffic or anything. But sitting there lying on the ground trying to put these plugs in, it was a long time getting those things in. And then what was even longer almost was filling the tire back up with that tiny little 12-volt compressor. It kept getting too hot. I'd have to stop and wait and let it cool down. And then, after 10 minutes or so of letting it cool down, I could fill it up again, and it would go for a maximum of maybe 5 or 10 minutes, and then it would get too hot, and then I'd have to turn it off and wait again. It took a long time. This was a big delay. It was probably a 2-hour delay or something, or at least it seemed that way, to get this tire fixed. But anyways, after I was done, I decided, like, what the heck, I'm only like a block away from that house. So from that house to here, something must have happened. So I decided to circle back around and see if I could see anything on the road that, I may have hit or thing. And lo and behold, when I drove past that customer's house, those guys were still working. And right where I had pulled in, I could actually still see, because like I said, though it's the rural road with like gravel on the sides, I could still see the tire marks of my truck. And what there was that I didn't see, that I got so close to, was one of those landscape rakes that they had left there. It was partly on the lawn, but part of it was sticking out. And I guess when I swung in to talk to them, the rear tire had gone over it. And just punctured it with the two tines, or the two sort of last row or teeth of the rake had punctured 2 holes in the tire. So I was like, oh man, that's what it was that happened so quickly. Because up to that point, there was no issue. It's, after the brief conversation and then driving away, that I must have drove over that rake as I pulled away, talking to the guy, and, it started to lose air rapidly after that. So that was another sort of crazy sort of incident for me. Now, the next one I've talked about before as well, and that was the time where I got a call to go do a client. This is well in the beginning of my lawn care career, and I think I actually saw this customer at Home Depot. And they saw me in my uniform. They came up to me and asked me if I could go to their home and give them a quote for cutting their lawn. But they said that they had an acre of property. Now, this is early on. I didn't have any ride-on machines or anything. I only had my 21-inch Honda with me at this point. But I was determined to pick up new business. I was green in the industry and thought, you know what, I will go. I got nothing else better to do. I don't have enough clients at this point to fill my day, so I might as well go. Yeah, it's going to take me a while to mow an acre of lawn with a 21-inch mower, but hey, I'm hungry for the work, and I'll go and take a look at it. So lo and behold, I get to this customer's house, and this is one of those things. The lady said she was in her, I would say she was in her 40s, late 40s, early 50s, the lady that I talked to at Home Depot, and she said that her husband was at home. And she just gave me the address and her phone number and said, go out there, have a look at it, give me a call, and you can talk to my husband and, go out there. So I'm expecting when I get to the house that I'm going to find, late 40s, 50-year-old guy there. And I pull up to this house, and yes, it's an acre of lawn, but it's also this sort of mansion house. It's like just this massive house. Absolutely gorgeous, huge front lawn as well, with tons of landscaping. Then the back lawn is just enormous. There's so much trimming and so many trees and things to go around. So I, walk the property, look at it, kind of figure out a price now that I laugh at. I think I was quoting them $120 or something to mow the lawn that day. To do that acre of land with a 21-inch mower, which evidently in the end took me 4 hours to mow. With a Honda 21, if you can imagine the Honda with the bag filling up, and then I'd have to go and empty the bag. I had tarps with me. I would dump the grass on tarps, and then I'd have to haul the tarps out on my shoulders to take the grass out. At this point in time, back then, I was taking grass to the dump too. So I was hauling it to my trailer, emptying the grass into the trailer, then going back, then mowing another few strips. Then I'd have to empty the bag. But anyways, the crazy part about this story is not so much the craziness that I mowed an acre of lawn with a 21-inch mower. That's pretty crazy. But it's when I went and knocked on the door to talk to the customer, to talk to the husband that I hadn't met. And the door opens and it's like this 90-year-old guy. And he comes to the door and he's got one hand on the door and one hand holding his pants up. And they're not zipped or buttoned and his belt is undone. So it kind of felt like I thought he was coming from the bathroom or something. He was holding his pants up. And I said, "Hi, I'm such and such. Your wife was talking to me and asked me to come and look at the lawn and all that sort of stuff." And he has this kind of glazed look. And all of a sudden, his eyes roll to the back of his head. All I see is the whites of his eyes. And his pants drop. And he falls backwards and passes out right there in the entranceway of his home. And I'm standing out the door going, what the heck? So, I rushed his aid and I'm like, you okay? Hello, are you okay? And he sort of comes to fairly quickly. And he, awkwardly gets up and he pulls his pants up and I asked if he's okay. I'm asking if he needs an ambulance and all that. And he's saying he's fine and everything, that he just passed out. He said he was sleeping when I was knocking on the door. So I guess he got up too quickly and put on his pants and came down the stairs and stuff. And it was just, a bunch of movement all at two once, and maybe got lightheaded and stuff. So, needless to say, he seemed like he was okay, but I called his wife. I told her what happened, and she was kind of freaking out and saying that she was on her way and thanking me for, staying with him and all that sort of stuff. It all sort of worked out in the end. Just a crazy thing. I can still to this day picture that guy with his pants falling and the whites of his eyes and just falling over. It was just crazy. So the next thing that has happened to me is two animal stories next. And so the first one, I was mowing this lawn. I'd been doing it on a weekly basis. This particular house, the lawn was very unkept. There was no edging to do. There was no, fertilizers or aerations or nothing with this. It was just cut it once a week. Now with this house, I was greeted each and every week with a very unhappy pit bull in the window. And there must have been a couch or something up against the wall because the dog was up on something and he was just peeved every time I was there. And so I'm, mowing the front lawn and all that sort of stuff, trying to ignore this dog week after week after week. And then I'd get to the backyard and it wouldn't be an issue because there was no windows or anything that the dog could see me. But there was a door and I could hear him barking at the door. Each and every week. So lo and behold, this one week I was there and I'm doing the front lawn. The dog is peeved as usual. And this is a big dog. This is like, he's all muscle and he is not happy. I'm mowing trimming this front lawn. Then I get to the backyard and I start doing my trimming there. I've got my, at this point in time, I was using the Honda trimmers, the 4-stroke trimmers, and I was using like the brush cutter style with the bicycle handles. So I had the full harness on with the trimmer hanging off this harness, and I'm trimming. And something, I don't know what it was. I don't know if I have a guardian angel, but something told me to turn around. I don't know if I faintly heard a noise or something, but as I was trimming, I turned the torso of my body, and the dog was coming at me full force. The door was open, and the dog was in full, number 10 rage. And luckily, as I was turning my torso, because I had the trimmer harness on and the trimmer was on that side, I swung the trimmer in front of me and I had the throttle on full, and that dog came inches away from getting his face pulverized. Luckily, it must have scared the, whatever you want to call out of the dog, the trimmer going. I don't know how he even saw the trimmer because the line was flying. But he put on the brakes, and I saw the owner pop out the door and start calling the dog back. And luckily, the trimmer scared the dog enough that he pulled on the brakes. It snapped his brain out of his full sort of rage, and he, skipped back to his owner, and the owner put the dog in and closed the door. And that was it. Didn't say anything, didn't apologize, didn't nothing. And like I say, that dog literally came a few inches from possibly having a really serious injury. Needless to say, I was almost pooping my pants. I was like, what the heck just happened? I was so freaked out. This dog has been staring me down week after week in full rage, and here all of a sudden it gets to that close to, getting to me. If I hadn't turned around, he probably would have, pounced on me or latched onto one of my legs or something like that. So that was a pretty crazy thing. So the next story, though, has got to be probably the craziest thing that's ever happened to me during lawn care. And with this one, I was in this new neighborhood. It was fancy houses. I was trimming this house. It was a corner lot. There was still a lot of undeveloped areas in this neighborhood because it was fairly new. So a lot of foresty areas and things like that. And with this particular customer, I had a key to their gates and fences and stuff because for whatever reason, they like to lock their yard and their gates and all that sort of stuff. So I had keys to get to their backyard and front yard and all that sort of stuff. So I was mowing along or trimming along the side of this boulevard going up the street, and I was heading from the front yard, I was heading towards the backyard along this corner. And they had, the 6-foot cedar fencing going around and then going along the backyard. So as I'm going up the street and I'm getting closer to the corner of their backyard on the outside of the fence, trimming sort of the boulevard, or the strip of grass between the sidewalk and their fence is more what I was doing there. And I'm heading towards this empty lot. This car is coming towards me down the street, coming from the sort of empty lot side and coming towards me. And he's waving his hands out his driver's window and trying to get my attention. So I was like, this guy, I guess he maybe wants a quote. Probably lives in the neighborhood, wants a quote for something, right? So I stop the trimmer and I turn it off, and the guy yells at me, back up. He says, there's a black bear coming along the fence, and you're he's going to be at the corner where you're going to end up there pretty soon. You guys are going to be face to face. And I was like, what the heck? So I started to backtrack, and I thanked the guy, and he said he's coming pretty, pretty quick, right? So I stopped what I was doing, obviously. I walked pretty quickly down the sidewalk, and I was like, I went around the corner to the driveway, and I'm trying to peek to see. I don't see anything. And I was like, okay, I'm going to go into the backyard, right? Because this bear is going to come around the corner, and then, here I am. So I'm grabbing the keys. I'm sticking my hand through. It's one of those like aluminum fences or gates. I'm sticking my hand through the fence. I'm trying to, get the key undone, the padlock, and I get the key, the lock open. I open the lock, and I get inside the gate, and I close the lock, and I lock it. And I'm trying to peek to see if this black bear is going to be coming down the sidewalk any moment. And I hear a noise, and I look over, and the black bear just jumped over the cedar fence of the customer's yard. It didn't actually go all the way to the corner where I was trimming up to. He decided to just jump the fence and go into the backyard. So now I'm like, holy smokes, I'm in the backyard here with this black bear, and now I've just locked myself in. So I'm like fidgeting with the keys, trying to find the right key again to open the gate. Luckily I'm like just panicking here. So I find the key, I get the lock open, I open the gate, and I lock it, and luckily the bear didn't really take notice of me, or if he did, he didn't care. And he was just waltzing around the backyard. I was able to get out, close the gate, lock it again. And, like I said, the bear wasn't really paying attention to me. So I was kind of just watching, hiding around the corner, kind of looking what he was doing. And, he walked onto like the patio and stuff. And then he just jumped over the fence and went into the other neighbor's yard. And I was like, holy smokes, here I am trying to open the gate and lock myself into this person's fence to protect myself, thinking that this gate's going to protect myself. And this black bear is just going over the fence like nobody's business. Like with no effort at all, this black bear just jumped over the fence. So I was just like, wow, that is crazy. I ended up going to my truck, putting the trimmer in the truck, and getting in and driving down the street to see if I could see the bear. And I could see it going from yard to yard. Some of the houses, because they were so new, some of them didn't have fences in the backyards yet and things like that. So I could see the bear going from yard to yard. And then he came out the front and was going, down the sidewalk. And I just sort of drove along in my truck. And I had a smartphone at the time, like a Windows Mobile, like right when smartphones first came out, sort of thing. So I was trying to record video of him using my phone. Of course, the videos was so not very good at the time. I think I still have that video somewhere. So it might be fun to try to dig that up and post that for you guys to check out. But yeah, that is probably the craziest thing that's ever happened to me in my lawn care career. So, I thought this would be a fun episode to sort of document some of those crazy things that have happened to me. If you guys have any crazy stories you'd like to share, I'd love to hear about them. Some of the things that have happened to you during your lawn care adventures. You can either, email me your stories, or leave a voicemail message again on the website with your stories, or hit me up on Instagram. Like I said, I'd love to hear some of the crazy things that have gone on with other people in lawn care. So I think that's it for this week. Here's to wishing you guys all overwhelming success and freedom in your lawn care business. Bye for now.